Day 3. The Seventh Story of the Decameron. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Anna Simon. The Decameron by Giovanni Boccaccio. Translated by J.M. Rigg. Day 3. The Seventh Story. Tebaldo, being in disfavour with his lady, departs from Florence. He returns thither after a while in the guise of a pilgrim, has speech of his lady, and makes her sensible of her fault. Her husband, convicted of slaying him, he delivers from peril of death, reconciles him with his brothers, and thereafter discreetly enjoys his lady.
So ceased Fiametta, and, when all had bestowed on her their meed of praise, the queen, to lose no time, forthwith bade Emilia resume the narration. So thus Emilia began.
I am minded to return to our city, whence my two last predecessors saw fit to depart, and to show you how one of our citizens recovered the lady he had lost. Know then that there was in Florence a young noble, his name Tebaldo Elisei, who, being beyond measure enamoured of a lady, hight Monna Ermelina, wife of one Aldobrandino Palermini, and by reason of his admirable qualities richly deserving to have his desire, found fortune nevertheless adverse, as she is wont to be to the prosperous, inasmuch as, for some reason or another, the lady, having shown herself gracious towards Tebaldo for a while, completely altered her mien, and not only showed him no further favour, but would not so much as receive a message from him, or suffer him to see her face, whereby he fell a prey to a grievous and distressful melancholy. But so well had he concealed his love, that the cause of his melancholy was surmised by none. He tried hard in divers ways to recover the love which he deemed himself to have lost for no fault of his, and finding all his efforts unavailing, he resolved to bid the world adieu, that he might not afford her who was the cause of his distress the satisfaction of seeing him languish. So he got together as much money as he might, and secretly, no word said to friend or kinsman except only a familiar gossip, who knew all, he took his departure for Ancona. Arrived there, he assumed the name of Filippo Santodecchio, and having foregathered with a rich merchant, entered his service. The merchant took him with him to Cyprus aboard one of his ships, and was so well pleased with his bearing and behaviour that he not only gave him a handsome salary, but made him in a sort his companion, and entrusted him with the management of no small part of his affairs, wherein he proved himself so apt and assiduous that in the course of a few years he was himself established in credit and wealth, and great repute as a merchant. 7 years thus passed, during which, albeit his thoughts frequently reverted to his cruel mistress, and sorely love smote him, and much he yearned to see her again, yet such was his firmness that he came off conqueror, until one day in Cyprus it so befell that there was sung in his hearing a song that he had himself composed, and of which the theme was the mutual love that was between his lady and him, and the delight that he had of her, which, as he heard, he found it incredible that she should have forgotten him, and burned with such a desire to see her once more that, being able to hold out no longer, he made up his mind to return to Florence. So, having set all his affairs in order, he betook him, attended only by a single servant, to Ancona, whence he sent all his effects as they arrived forward to Florence, consigning them to a friend of his encontent partner, and followed with his servant in the disguise of a pilgrim returned from the Holy Sepulchre. Arrived at Florence, he put up at a little hostelry kept by 2 brothers hard by his lady's house, whither he forthwith hied him, hoping that, perchance, he might have sight of her from the street. But, finding all barred and bolted, doors, windows, and all else, he doubted much she must be dead, or have removed thence. So, with a very heavy heart, he returned to the house of the 2 brothers, and to his great surprise found his own 4 brothers standing in front of it, all in black. He knew that he was so changed from his former semblance, both in dress and in person, that he might not readily be recognized, and he had therefore no hesitation in going up to a shoemaker and asking him why these men were all dressed in black. The shoemaker answered, "'Tis because 'tis not 15 days since a brother of theirs, Tebaldo by name, that had been long abroad, was slain, and I understand that they have proved in court that one Aldobrandino Palermini, who is under arrest, did the deed, because Tebaldo, who loved his wife, was come back to Florence incognito to foregather with her." Tidaldo found it passing strange that there should be anyone so like him as to be mistaken for him, and deplored Aldobrandino's evil plight. He had learned, however, that the lady was alive and well. So, as it was now night, he hied him, much perplexed in mind, into the inn, and supped with his servant. The bedroom assigned him was almost at the top of the house, and the bed was none of the best. Thoughts many and disquieting haunted his mind, and his supper had been but light. Whereby it befell that midnight came and went, and Tidaldo was still awake. As thus he watched, he heard shortly after midnight a noise as of persons descending from the roof into the house, and then through the chinks of the door of his room he caught the flicker of an ascending light. Wherefore he stole softly to the door, and peeping through a chink to make out what was afoot, he saw a very fine young woman bearing a light, and 3 men making towards her, being evidently those that had descended from the roof. The men exchanged friendly greetings with the young woman, and then one said to her, "Now, God be praised, we may make our minds easy, for we are well assured that judgment for the death of Tiraldo Elisei is gotten by his brothers against Aldobrandino Palamini, and he has confessed, and the sentence is already drawn up. But still it behoves us to hold our peace, for, should it ever get abroad that we were guilty, we shall stand in the like jeopardy as Aldobrandino." So saying, they took leave of the woman, who seemed much cheered, and went to bed. What he had heard set Tidaldo musing on the number and variety of the errors to which men are liable, as first how his brothers had mourned and interned a stranger in his stead, and then charged an innocent man upon false suspicion, and by false witness brought him into imminent peril of death, from which he passed to ponder the blind severity of laws and magistrates, who, from misguided zeal to elicit the truth, not unfrequently become ruthless, and, adjudging that which is false, forfeit the title which they claim of ministers of God and justice, and do but execute the mandates of iniquity and the evil one. And so he came at last to consider the possibility of saving Aldobrandino, and formed a plan for the purpose. Accordingly, on the morrow, when he was risen, he left his servant at the inn, and hied him alone, at what he deemed a convenient time, to his lady's house, where, finding by chance the door open, he entered and saw his lady sitting, all tears and lamentations, in a little parlour on the ground floor. Whereat he all but wept for sympathy, and drawing near her, he said, "Madam, be not troubled in spirit, your peace is nigh you." Whereupon the lady raised her head, and said between her sobs, "Good man, what dost thou, a pilgrim, if I mistake not, from distant parts, know either of my peace or of my affliction?" "Madam," returned the pilgrim, "I am of Constantinople, and am but now come hither at God's behest, that I may give you laughter for tears, and deliver your husband from death." "But," said the lady, "if thou art of Constantinople, and but now arrived, how is it that thou knowest either who my husband is or who I am?" Whereupon the pilgrim gave her the whole narrative from the very beginning of Aldobrandino's sufferings. He also told her who she was, how long she had been married, and much besides that was known to him of her affairs. Whereat the lady was lost in wonder, and, taking him to be a prophet, threw herself on her knees at his feet, and besought him for God's sake, if he were come to save Aldobrandino, to lose no time, for the matter brooked no delay. Thus adjured, the pilgrim assumed an air of great sanctity, as he said, "Arise, madam, weep not, but hearken diligently to what I shall say to you, and look to it that you impart it to none. I have it by revelation of God that the tribulation wherein you stand is come upon you in requital of a sin which you did once commit, of which God is minded that this suffering be a partial purgation, and that you make reparation in full, if you would not find yourself in a far more grievous plight." "Sir," replied the lady, "many sins have I committed, nor know I how among them all to single out that whereof, more than another, God requires reparation at my hands. Wherefore, if you know it, tell it me, and what by way of reparation I may do, that will I do." "Madam," returned the pilgrim, "well wot I what it is, nor shall I question you thereof for my better instruction, but that the rehearsal may give you increase or remorse therefore. But pass we now to fact. Tell me, mind you ever to have had a lover?" Whereat the lady heaved a deep sigh, then, marvelling not a little, for she had thought it was known to none, albeit on the day when the man was slain, who was afterwards buried as Tidaldo, there had been some buzz about it, occasioned by some indiscreet words dropped by Tidaldo's gossip and confidant, she made answer, I see that there is naught that man keeps secret but God reveals it to you, wherefore I shall not endeavour to hide my secrets from you. True it is that in my youth I was beyond measure enamoured of the unfortunate young man whose death is imputed to my husband, whom I mourned with grief unfeigned, for, albeit I showed myself harsh and cruel towards him before his departure, yet neither thereby, nor by his long absence, nor yet by his calamitous death, was my heart estranged from him. Then said the pilgrim, it was not the unfortunate young man now dead that you did love, but Tidaldo Elisee. But let that pass. Now tell me, wherefore lost he your good graces? Did he ever offend you? Nay, verily, answered the lady, he never offended me at all. My harshness was prompted by an accursed friar, to whom I once confessed, and who, when I told him of the love I bore Tidaldo, and my intimacy with him, made my ears so tingle and sing, that I still shudder to think of it, warning me that, if I gave it not up, I should fall into the jaws of the devil in the abyss of hell, and be cast into the avenging fire. Whereby I was so terrified that I quite made my mind up to discontinue my intimacy with him, and, to trench the matter, I would thenceforth have none of his letters or messages. And so I suppose he went away in despair. Though I doubt not, had he persevered a while longer, I should not have seen him wasting away like snow in sunshine, without relenting of my harsh resolve. For, in sooth, there was nothing in the world I would so gladly have done. Then said the pilgrim, Madam, 'tis this sin, and this only, that has brought upon you your present tribulation. I know positively that Tidaldo did never put force upon you. 'Twas of your own free will, and for that he pleased you, that you became enamoured of him. Your constant visitor, your intimate friend he became, because you yourself would have it so. And in the course of your intimacy you showed him such favour by word and deed, that, if he loved you first, you multiplied his love full 1,000-fold. And if so it was, and well yourself from him, you should have considered the whole matter before the die was cast, and not have entered upon it, if you deemed you might have cause to repent you of it as a sin. As soon as he became yours, you became his. Had he not been yours, you might have acted as you had thought fit, at your own unfettered discretion. But as you were his, 'twas robbery, 'twas conduct most disgraceful, to sever yourself from him against his will. Now you must know that I am a friar, and therefore all the ways of friars are familiar to me, nor does it misbecome me, as it might another, to speak for your behoof somewhat freely of them, as I am minded to do, that you may have better understanding of them in the future than you would seem to have had in the past. Time was when the friars were most holy and worthy men, but those who today take the name and claim the reputation of friars have naught of the friar save only the habit. Nay, they have not even that, for whereas their founders ordained that their habits should be straight, of a sorry sort, and of coarse stuff, apt symbols of a soul, that in arraying the body in so mean a garb did despite to all things temporal, our modern friars will have them full, and double, and resplendent, and of the finest stuff, and of a fashion goodly and pontifical, wherein without shame they flaunt it like peacocks in the church, in the piazza, even as do the laity in their robes. And as the fisherman casts his net into the stream with intent to take many fish at one throw, so it is the main solicitude and study, art and craft of these friars to embrace and entangle within the ample folds of their vast swelling skirts beguines, widows, and other foolish women, ay, and men likewise in great number. Wherefore, to speak with more exactitude, the friars of today have naught of the habit of the friar, save only the colour thereof. And whereas the friars of old time sought to win men to their salvation, those of today seek to win their women and their wealth. Wherefore they have made it and make it their sole concern by declamation and imagery to strike terror into the souls of fools, and to make believe that sins are purged by alms and masses, to the end that they, base wretches that have fled to friars not to ensue holiness but to escape hardship, may receive from this man bread, from that man wine, and from the other man a donation from masses for the souls of his dead. True indeed it is that sins are purged by almsgiving and prayer, but did they who give the alms know, did they but understand to whom, or throw them to so many pigs. And, knowing that the fewer be they that share great riches, the greater their ease, 'tis the study of each how best by declamation and intimidation to oust others from that whereof he would fain be the sole owner. They censure lust in men, that they turning therefrom the sole use of their women may remain to the censors. They condemn usury and unlawful gains, that, being entrusted with the restitution thereof, they may be able to enlarge their habits, and to purchase bishoprics and other great preferments with the very money which they have made believe must bring its possessor to perdition. And when they are taxed with these and many other discreditable practices, they deem that there is no censure, however grave, of which they may not be quit by their glib formula, "Follow our precepts, not our practice," as if it were possible that the sheep should be of a more austere and rigid virtue than the shepherds. And how many of these, whom they put off with this formula, understand it not in the way in which they enunciate it, not a few of them know. The friars of today would have you follow their precepts, that is to say, they would have you fill their purses with coin, confide to them your secrets, practice continence, be long-suffering, forgive those that trespass against you, keep yourselves from evil speaking, all which things are good, seemly, holy. But to what end? To the end that they may be able to do that which, if the laity do it, they will not be able to do. Who knows not that idleness cannot subsist without money? Spend thy money on their pleasures, and the friar will not be able to live in sloth in his order. Go after women, and there will be no place for the friar. Be not long-suffering, pardon not the wrongdoer, and the friar will not dare to cross thy threshold to corrupt thy family. But wherefore pursue I the topic through every detail? They accuse themselves as often as they so excuse themselves in the hearing of all that have understanding. Why seclude they not themselves, if they misdoubt their power to lead continent and holy lives? Or, if they must needs not live as recluses, why follow they not that other holy text of the gospel, Christ began to do and to teach? Let them practice first, and school us with their precepts afterwards. 1,000 such have I seen in my day, admirers, lovers, philanderers, not of ladies of the world alone, but of nuns, ay, and they too such as made the most noise in the pulpit. Is it such as they that we are to follow? He that does so pleases himself, but God knows if he do wisely. But assume that herein we must allow that your censor, the friar, spoke truth, to wit, that none may break the marriage vow without very grave sin. What then? To rob a man, to slay him, to make of him an exile and a wanderer on the face of the earth, are not these yet greater sins? None will deny that so they are. A woman that indulges herself in the intimate use with a man commits but a sin of nature, but if she rob him, or slay him, or drive him out into exile, her sin proceeds from depravity of spirit. That you did rob Tedaldo, I have already shown you, in that, having of your own free will become his, you reft you from him. I now go further and say that, so far as in you lay, you slew him, seeing that, showing yourself ever more and more cruel, you did your utmost to drive him to take his own life, and in the law's intent he that is the cause that wrong is done is as culpable as he that does it. Nor is it deniable that you were the cause that for 7 years he has been an exile and a wanderer upon the face of the earth. Wherefore upon each of the said 3 articles you are found guilty of a greater crime than you committed by your intimacy with him. But consider we the matter more closely. Perchance Tedaldo merited such treatment? Nay, but assuredly it was not so. You have yourself so confessed. Besides which, I know that he loves you more dearly than himself. He would laud, he would extol, he would magnify you above all other ladies, so as never was heard the like, wheresoever 'twas seemly for him to speak of you, and it might be done without exciting suspicion. All his bliss, all his honour, all his liberty he avowed was entirely in your disposal. Was he not of noble birth? And for beauty might he not compare with the rest of his townsfolk? Did he not excel in all the exercises and accomplishments proper to youth? Was he not beloved, held dear, well seen of all men? You will not deny it. How then could you, at the behest of a paltry friar, silly, brutish and envious, bring yourself to deal with him in any harsh sort. I cannot estimate the error of those ladies who look askance on men and hold them cheap; whereas, bethinking them of what they are themselves, and what and how great is the nobility with which God has endowed man above all the other animals, they ought rather to glory in the love which men give them, and hold them most dear, and with all zeal study to please them, that so their love may never fail. In what sort you did so, instigated by the chatter of a friar, some broth-guzzling, pastry-gorging knave without a doubt, you know, and peradventure his purpose was but to install himself in the place whence he sought to oust another. This then is the sin which the divine justice, which, ever operative, suffers no perturbation of its even balance, or arrest of judgment, has decreed not to leave unpunished. Wherefore, as without due cause you devised how you might despoil Tidaldo of yourself, so without due cause your husband has been placed, and is in jeopardy of his life, on Tidaldo's account, and to your sore affliction. Wherefrom, if you would be delivered, there is that which you must promise, ay, and, much more, which you must perform. To wit, that, should it ever betide that Tidaldo return hither from his long exile, you will restore him your favour, your love, your tender regard, your intimacy, and reinstate him in the position which he held before you foolishly hearkened to the half-witted friar. Thus ended the pilgrim, and the lady, who had followed him with the closest attention, deeming all that he advanced very sound, and doubting not that her tribulation was, as he said, in requital of her sin, spoke thus: "Friend of God, well I wot that the matters which you discourse are true, and, thanks to your delineation, I now in great measure know what manner of men are the friars, whom I have hitherto regarded as all alike holy, nor doubt I that great was my fault in the course which I pursued towards Tidaldo. And gladly, were it in my power, would I make reparation in the manner which you have indicated. But how is this feasible? Tidaldo can never return to us. He is dead. Wherefore I know not why I must needs give you a promise which cannot be performed." "Madam," returned the pilgrim, "'tis revealed to me by God that Tidaldo is by no means dead, but alive and well and happy, so only he enjoyed your favour." "Nay, but," said the lady, "speak advisedly. I saw his body done to death by more than one knife wound. I folded it in these arms, and drenched the dead face with many a tear, whereby perchance I gave occasion for the brood that has been made to my disadvantage." "Say what you may, madam," rejoined the pilgrim, "I assure you that Tidaldo lives, and if you will but give the promise, then, for its fulfilment, I have good hope that you will soon see him." Whereupon, "I give the promise," said the lady, "and right gladly will I make it good, nor is there aught that might happen that would yield me such delight as to see my husband free and scathless, and Tidaldo alive." Tidaldo now deemed it wise to make himself known, and establish the lady in a more sure hope of her husband's safety. Wherefore he said, "Madam, to set your mind at ease in regard of your husband, I must first impart to you his secret, which be mindful to disclose to none so long as you live." Then, for such was the confidence which the lady reposed in the pilgrim's apparent sanctity, that they were by themselves in a place remote from observation, Tidaldo drew forth a ring which he had guarded with the most jealous care, since it had been given him by the lady on the last night when they were together, and said, as he showed it to her, "Madam, know you this?" The lady recognized it forthwith, and answered, "I do, sir. I gave it long ago to Tidaldo." Then the pilgrim, rising and throwing off his sclavine and hat, said with a Florentine accent, "And know you me?" The lady, recognizing forthwith the form and semblance of Tidaldo, was struck dumb with wonder and fear, as of a corpse that is seen to go about as if alive, and was much rather disposed to turn and flee from Tidaldo returned from the tomb, than to come forward and welcome Tidaldo arrived from Cyprus. But when Tidaldo said to her, "Fear not, madam, your Tidaldo am I, alive and well, nor was I ever dead, whatever you and my brothers may think," the lady, partly awed, partly reassured by his voice, regarded him with rather more attention, and inly affirming that 'twas in very truth Tidaldo, threw herself upon his neck and wept and kissed him, saying, "Sweet my Tidaldo, welcome home." "Madam," replied Tidaldo, after he had kissed and embraced her, "time serves not now for greetings more intimate. 'Tis for me to be up and doing, that Aldobrandino may be restored to you safe and sound; touching which matter you will, I trust, before tomorrow at even hear tidings that will gladden your heart. Indeed I expect to have good news tonight, and if so, will come and tell it you, when I shall be less straitened than I am at present." He then resumed his clavine and hat, and having kissed the lady again, and bade her be of good cheer, took his leave, and hied him to the prison, where Aldobrandino lay more occupied with apprehension of imminent death than hope of deliverance to come. As ministrant of consolation he gained ready admittance of the warders, and, seating himself by Aldobrandino's side, he said, "Aldobrandino, in me thou seest a friend sent thee by God, who is touched with pity of thee by reason of thy innocence. Wherefore, if in reverent submission to him thou wilt grant me a slight favour that I shall ask of thee, without fail, before tomorrow at even, thou shalt, in lieu of the doom of death that thou awaitest, hear thy acquittal pronounced." "Worthy man," replied Aldobrandino, "I know thee not, nor mind I ever to have seen thee. Wherefore, as thou showest thyself solicitous for my safety, my friend indeed thou must needs be, even as thou sayest. And in sooth the crime for which they say I ought to be doomed to death I never committed, though others enough I have committed, which perchance have brought me to this extremity. However, if so be that God has now pity on me, this I tell thee in reverent submission to him, that, whereas 'tis but a little thing that thou cravest of me, there is naught, however great, but I would not only promise, but gladly do it. Wherefore, even ask what thou wilt, and if so be that I escape, I will without fail keep my word to the letter." "Nay," returned the pilgrim, "I ask but this of thee, that thou pardon Tidaldo's 4 brothers, that in the belief that thou wast guilty of their brother's death they brought thee to this strait, and, so they ask thy forgiveness, account them as thy brothers and friends." "How sweet," replied Aldobrandino, "is the savour, how ardent the desire, of vengeance, none knows but he that is wronged; but yet, so God may take thought for my deliverance, I will gladly pardon, nay, I do now pardon them, and if I go hence alive and free, I will thenceforth have them in such regard as shall content thee." Satisfied with this answer, the pilgrim, without further parley, heartily exhorted Aldobrandino to be of good cheer, assuring him that, before the next day was done, he should be certified beyond all manner of doubt of his deliverance. And so he left him. On quitting the prison, the pilgrim hied him forthwith to the signory, and being closeted with the knight that was in charge, thus spoke: "My lord, 'tis the duty of all, and most especially of those who hold your place, zealously to bestir themselves that the truth be brought to light, in order as well that those bear not the penalty who have not committed the crime, as that the guilty be punished. And that this may come to pass to your honour and the undoing of the delinquent, I am come hither to you. You wot that you have dealt rigorously with Aldobrandino Palermini, and have found, as you think, that 'twas he that slew Tidaldo Elisei, and you are about to condemn him, wherein you are most certainly in error, as I doubt not before midnight to prove to you, delivering the murderers into your hands." The worthy knight, who was not without pity for Aldobrandino, readily gave ear to the pilgrim's words. He conversed at large with him, and availing himself of his guidance, made an easy capture of the 2 brothers that kept the inn and their servant in their first sleep. He was about to put them to the torture, to elicit the true state of the case, when, their courage failing, they confessed without the least reserve, severally at first and then jointly, that 'twas they that had slain Tidaldo Elisei, not knowing who he was. Asked for why, they answered that 'twas because he had sorely harassed the wife of one of them, and would have constrained her to do his pleasure while they were out of doors. Whereof the pilgrim was no sooner apprized than by leave of the knight he withdrew, and hied him privily to the house of Madonna Ermelina, whom, the rest of the household being gone to bed, he found awaiting him alone, and equally anxious for good news of her husband and a complete reconciliation with her Tidaldo. On entering, he blithely exclaimed, "Rejoice, dearest my lady, for thou mayst rest assured that tomorrow thou shalt have thy Aldobrandino back here safe and sound." And to confirm her faith in his words, he told her all that he had done. Greater joy was never woman's than hers of two such glad surprises, to wit, to have Tidaldo with her alive again, whom she had wailed for verily dead, and to know Aldobrandino, whom she had thought in no long time to wail for dead, now out of jeopardy. Wherefore, when she had affectionately embraced and kissed her Tidaldo, they hied them to bed together, and with hearty good will made gracious and gladsome consummation of their peace by interchange of sweet solace. With the approach of day, Tidaldo rose, and having first apprized the lady of his purpose, and enjoined her, as before, to keep it most secret, resumed his pilgrim's habit, and sallied forth of her house, to be ready, as occasion should serve, to act in Aldobrandino's interest. As soon as 'twas day, the Signory, deeming themselves amply conversant with the affair, set Aldobrandino at large, and a few days later they caused the malefactors to be beheaded in the place where they had done the murder. Great was Aldobrandino's joy to find himself free, nor less great was that of his lady and all his friends and kinsfolk, and as 'twas through the pilgrim that it had come about, they brought him to their house, there to reside as long as he cared to tarry in the city, nor could they do him honour and cheer enough, and most of all the lady, who knew her man. But after a while, seeing that his brothers were not only become a common laughing-stock by reason of Aldobrandino's acquittal, but had armed themselves for very fear, he felt that their reconciliation with him brooked no delay, and accordingly craved of him performance of his promise. Aldobrandino replied handsomely that it should be had at once. The pilgrim then bade him arrange for the following day a grand banquet, at which he and his kinsfolk and their ladies were to entertain the 4 brothers and their ladies, adding that he would himself go forthwith as Aldobrandino's envoy, and bid them welcome to his peace and banquet. All which being approved by Aldobrandino, the pilgrim hied him with all speed to the 4 brothers, whom by ample, apt, and unanswerable argument he readily induced to reinstate themselves in Aldobrandino's friendship by suing for his forgiveness. Which done, he bade them and their ladies to breakfast with Aldobrandino on the morrow, and they, being assured of his good faith, were consenting to come. So on the morrow, at the breakfast hour, Tidaldo's 4 brothers, still wearing their black, came with certain of their friends to Aldobrandino's house, where he awaited them, and in presence of the company that had been bidden to meet them, laid down their arms and made surrender to Aldobrandino, asking his pardon of that which they had done against him. Aldobrandino received them compassionately, wept, kissed each on the mouth, and let few words suffice to remit each offence. After them came their sisters and their wives, all habited sadly, and were graciously received by Madonna Ermelina and the other ladies. The guests, men and women alike, found all things ordered at the banquet with magnificence, nor aught unmeet for commendation, save the restraint which the yet recent grief, betokened by the sombre garb of Tidaldo's kinsfolk, laid upon speech, wherein some had found matter to except against the banquet and the pilgrim for devising it, as he well knew. But, as he had premeditated, in due time he stood up, the others being occupied with their dessert, and spoke thus: "Nothing is wanting to complete the gaiety of this banquet except the presence of Tidaldo, whom, as you have been long time with him and have not known him, I will point out to you." So, having divested himself of his sclavine and whatever else in his garb denoted the pilgrim, he remained habited in a tunic of green taffeta, in which guise so great was the wonder with which all regarded him that, though they recognized him, 'twas long before any dared to believe that 'twas actually Tidaldo. Marking their surprise, Tidaldo told them not a little about themselves, their family connections, their recent history, and his own adventures. Whereat his brothers and the rest of the men, all weeping for joy, hasted to embrace him, followed by the women, as well those that were not, as those that were, of kin to him, save only Madonna Ermelina. Which Aldobrandino observing, said, "What is this, Ermelina? how comes it that, unlike the other ladies, thou alone dost Tebaldo no cheer?" "Cheer," replied the lady in the hearing of all, "would I gladly do him such as no other woman has done or could do, seeing that I am more beholden to him than any other woman, in that to him I owe it that I have thee with me again. 'Tis but the words spoken to my disadvantage, while we mourned him that we deemed Tebaldo, that give me pause." "Now out upon thee," said Aldobrandino. "Think'st thou that I heed the yelping of these curs? His zeal for my deliverance has abundantly disproved it, besides which I never believed it. Quick, get thee up, and go and embrace him." The lady, who desired nothing better, was in this not slow to obey her husband. She rose forthwith, and embraced Tebaldo as the other ladies had done, and did him gladsome cheer. Tebaldo's brothers and all the company, men and women alike, heartily approved Aldobrandino's handsomeness, and so whatever of despite the rumour had engendered in the minds of any was done away. And now that all had done him cheer, Tebaldo with his own hands rent his brothers' suits of black upon their backs, as also the sad-hued garments which his sisters and sisters-in-law wore, and bade bring other apparel; which when they had donned, there was no lack of singing, dancing, and other sorts of merrymaking, whereby the banquet, for all its subdued beginning, had a sonorous close. Then, just as they were, in the blithest of spirits, they hied them all to Tebaldo's house, where in the evening they supped, and in this manner they held festival for several days. 'Twas some time before the Florentines ceased to look on Tebaldo as a portent, as if he were risen from the dead, and the shadow of doubt whether he were really Tebaldo or no continued to lurk in the minds of not a few, including even his brothers. They had no assured belief, and in that frame had perchance long continued, but for a casual occurrence that showed them who the murdered man was. It so befell that one day some men-at-arms from Lunigiana passed by their house, and seeing Tebaldo, accosted him, saying, "Good morrow to thee, Fiesole." To whom Tebaldo, in the presence of his brothers, answered, "You take me for another." Whereat they were abashed, and asked his pardon, saying, "Sooth to tell, you are liker than we ever knew any man like to another, to a comrade of ours, Fiesole da Pontremoli by name, who came hither a fortnight ago, or perhaps a little more, since when we have not been able to learn what became of him. Most true it is that your dress surprised us, because he, like ourselves, was a soldier." Whereupon Tebaldo's eldest brother came forward, and asked how their comrade had been accoutred. They told him, and was found to have been exactly as they said, by which and other evidence 'twas established that 'twas Fiesole that had been murdered, and not Tebaldo, of whom thenceforth no suspicion lurked in the minds of his brothers or any one else. So then Tebaldo returned home very rich, and remained constant in his love, nor did the lady again treat him harshly, but, using discretion, they long had mutual solace of their love. God grant us solace of ours. End of Day 3, the 7th story.
Day 3, the 8th story of the Decameron. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Philippa Jevons. The Decameron by Giovanni Boccaccio, translated by J.M. Rigg. Day 3, the 8th story. Ferrando, having taken a certain powder, is interred for dead, is disinterred by the abbot, who enjoys his wife, is put in prison and taught to believe that he is in purgatory, is then resuscitated, and rears as his own a boy begotten by the abbot upon his wife.
Ended Emilia's long story, which to none was the less pleasing for its length, but was deemed of all the ladies brief in regard of the number and variety of the events therein recounted. A gesture of the queen's sufficed to convey her behest to Lauretta, and cause her thus to begin.
Dearest ladies, I have it in mind to tell you a true story, which wears far more of the aspect of a lie than of that which it really was. 'Tis brought to my recollection by that which we have heard of one being bewailed and buried in lieu of another. My story, then, is of one that, living, was buried for dead, and after believed with many others that he came out of the tomb, not as one that had not died, but as one risen from the dead, whereby he was venerated as a saint, who ought rather to have been condemned as a criminal. Know then that there was, and still is, in Tuscany, an abbey, situate, as we see not a few, in a somewhat solitary spot, wherein the office of abbot was held by a monk, who in all other matters ordered his life with great sanctity, save only in the commerce with women, and therein knew so well how to cloak his indulgence, that scarce any there were that so much as suspected, not to say detected it, so holy and just was he reputed in all matters. Now the abbot consorted much with a very wealthy contadino, Ferrando by name, a man coarse and gross beyond measure, whose friendship the abbot only cared for because of the opportunities which it afforded of deriving amusement from his simplicity. And during their intercourse the abbot discovered that Ferrando had a most beautiful wife, of whom he became so hotly enamoured that he could think of naught else either by day or by night. But learning that however simple and inept in all other matters, Ferrando showed excellent good sense in cherishing and watching over this wife of his, he almost despaired. However, being very astute, he prevailed so far with Ferrando that he would sometimes bring his wife with him to take a little recreation in the abbey garden, where he discoursed to them with all lowliness of the blessedness of life eternal, and the most pious works of many men and women of times past, insomuch that the lady conceived a desire to confess to him, and craved and had Ferrando's leave therefore. So, to the abbot's boundless delight, the lady came and seated herself at his feet to make her confession, whereto she prefixed the following exordium: "If God, sir, had given me a husband, or had not permitted me to have one, perchance 'twould be easy for me under your guidance to enter the way of which you have spoken, that leads to life eternal. But considering what manner of man Ferrando is, and his stupidity, I may call myself a widow while yet I am married, in that so long as he lives I may have no other husband, and he, fool that he is without the least cause so inordinately jealous of me, that 'tis not possible but that my life with him be one of perpetual tribulation and woe. Wherefore, before I address myself to make further confession, I in all humility beseech you to be pleased to give me some counsel of this matter, for here or nowhere is to be found the source of the amelioration of my life, and if it be not found, neither confession nor any other good work will be of any avail." The abbot was overjoyed to hear her thus speak, deeming that fortune had opened a way to the fulfilment of his heart's desire. Wherefore he said, "My daughter, I doubt not that 'tis a great affliction to a lady, fair and delicate as you are, to have a fool for a husband, and still more so that he should be jealous, and as your husband is both the one and the other, I readily credit what you say of your tribulation. But, to come to the point, I see no resource or remedy in this case, save only this, that Ferrando be cured of his jealousy. The medicine that shall cure him I know very well how to devise, but it behoves you to keep secret what I am about to tell you." "Doubt not of it, my father," said the lady, "for I had rather suffer death than tell any aught that you forbade me to tell. But the medicine, how is it to be devised?" "If we would have him cured," replied the abbot, "it can only be by his going to purgatory." "And how may that be?" returned the lady. "Can he go thither while he yet lives?" "He must die," answered the abbot, "and so he will go thither, and when he has suffered pain enough to be cured of his jealousy, we have certain prayers with which we will supplicate God to restore him to life, and he will do so." "Then," said the lady, "am I to remain a widow?" "Yes," replied the abbot, "for a certain time, during which you must be very careful not to let yourself be married to another, because 'twould offend God, and when Ferrando was restored to life, you would have to go back to him, and he would be more jealous than ever." "Be it so then," said the lady. "If he be but cured of his jealousy, and so I be not doomed to pass the rest of my days in prison, I shall be content. Do as ye think best." "And so will I," said the abbot. "But what reward shall I have for such a service?" "My father," said the lady, "what you please, so only it be in my power. But what may the like of me do that may be acceptable to a man such as you?" "Madam," replied the abbot, "'tis in your power to do no less for me than I am about to do for you. As that which I am minded to do will ensure your comfort and consolation, so there is that which you may do which will be the deliverance and salvation of my life." "If it be so," said the lady, "I shall not be found wanting." "In that case," said the abbot, "you will give me your love, and gratify my passion for you, with which I am all afire, and wasting away." Whereto the lady, all consternation, replied, "Alas, my father, what is this you crave? I took you for a holy man. Now does it beseem holy men to make such overtures to ladies that come to them for counsel?" "Marvel not, fair my soul," returned the abbot. "Hereby is my holiness in no wise diminished, for holiness resides in the soul, and this which I ask of you is but a sin of the flesh. But however it may be, such is the might of your bewitching beauty, that love constrains me thus to act. And let me tell you, good cause have you to vaunt you of your beauty more than other women, in that it delights the saints, who are used to contemplate celestial beauties. Whereto I may add that, albeit I am an abbot, yet I am a man, even as others, and, as you see, not yet old. Nor need this matter seem formidable to you, but rather to be anticipated with pleasure. For while Ferrando is in purgatory, I shall be your nightly companion, and will give you such solace as he should have given you. Nor will it ever be discovered by any, for all think of me, even as you did a while ago, or even more so. Reject not the grace that God accords you, for 'tis in your power to have, and if you are wise and follow my advice, you shall have that which women not a few desire in vain to have. And moreover I have jewels fair and rare, which I am minded shall be yours and none others. Wherefore, sweet my hope, deny me not due guerdon of the service which I gladly render you." The lady, her eyes still downcast, knew not how to deny him, and yet scrupled to gratify him. Wherefore the abbot, seeing that she had hearkened and hesitated to answer, deemed that she was already half won, and following up what he had said with much more to the like effect, did not rest until he had persuaded her that she would do well to comply. And so with some confusion she told him that she was ready to obey his every behest, but it might not be until Ferrando was in purgatory. The abbot, well content, replied, "And we will send him thither forthwith. Do but arrange that he come hither to stay with me tomorrow or the day after." Which said, he slipped a most beautiful ring on her finger, and dismissed her. Pleased with the gift, and expecting more to come, the lady rejoined her attendants, with whom she forthwith fell a talking marvellous things of the abbot's sanctity, and so went home with them. Some few days after, Ferrando being come to the abbey, the abbot no sooner saw him than he resolved to send him to purgatory. So he selected from among his drugs a powder of marvellous virtue, which he had gotten in the Levant from a great prince, who averred that 'twas wont to be used by the old man of the mountain, when he would send any one to or bring him from his paradise, and that, without doing the recipient any harm, 'twould induce in him, according to the quantity of the dose, a sleep of such duration and quality, that while the efficacy of the powder lasted, none would deem him to be alive. Whereof he took enough to cause a 3 days' sleep, and gave it to Ferrando in his cell, in a beaker that had still some wine in it, so that he drank it unwittingly. After which he took Ferrando to the cloister, and there with some of his monks fell to making merry with him and his ineptitudes. In no long time, however, the powder so wrought that Ferrando was seized in the head with a fit of somnolence so sudden and violent, that he slept as he stood, and sleeping fell to the ground. The abbot put on an agitated air, caused him to be untrussed, sent for cold water and had it sprinkled on his face, and applied such other remedies as if he would fain call back life and sense banished by vapours of the stomach or some other intrusive force. But as, for all that he and his monks did, Ferrando did not revive, they, after feeling his pulse and finding there no sign of life, one and all pronounced him certainly dead. Wherefore they sent word to his wife and kinsfolk, who came forthwith and mourned a while, after which Ferrando in his clothes was by the abbot's order laid in a tomb. The lady went home, saying that nothing should ever part her from a little son that she had borne Ferrando, and so she occupied herself with the care of her son and Ferrando's estate. At night the abbot rose noiselessly, and with the help of a Bolognese monk, in whom he reposed much trust, and who was that very day arrived from Bologna, got Ferrando out of the tomb, and bore him to a vault which admitted no light, having been made to serve as a prison for delinquent monks. And having stripped him of his clothes and habited him as a monk, they laid him on a truss of straw, and left him there until he should revive. Expecting which event, and instructed by the abbot how he was then to act, the Bolognese monk, none else knowing aught of what was afoot, kept watch by the tomb. The day after, the abbot with some of his monks paid a pastoral visit to the lady's house, where he found her in mourning weeds and sad at heart, and after administering a little consolation, he gently asked her to redeem her promise. Free as she now felt herself, and hampered neither by Ferrando nor by any other, the lady, who had noticed another beautiful ring on the abbot's finger, promised immediate compliance, and arranged with the abbot that he should visit her the very next night. So at nightfall the abbot donned Ferrando's clothes, and, attended by his monk, paid his visit, and lay with her until matins, to his immense delight and solace, and so returned to the abbey. And many visits he paid her on the same errand, whereby some that met him, coming or going that way, supposed that 'twas Ferrando perambulating those parts by way of penance, and fables not a few passed from mouth to mouth of the foolish rustics, and sometimes reached the ears of the lady, who was at no loss to account for them. As for Ferrando, when he revived, 'twas only to find himself he knew not where, while the Bolognese monk entered the tomb, gibbering horribly and armed with a rod, wherewith, having laid hold of Ferrando, he gave him a severe thrashing. Blubbering and bellowing for pain, Ferrando could only ejaculate, "Where am I?" "In purgatory," replied the monk. "How?" returned Ferrando. "Am I dead, then?" And the monk assuring him that 'twas even so, he fell a bewailing his own and his lady's and his son's fate after the most ridiculous fashion in the world. The monk brought him somewhat to eat and drink, of which when Ferrando caught sight, "Oh," said he, "dead folk eat, then, do they?" "They do," replied the monk, "and this which I bring thee is what the lady that was thy wife sent this morning to the church by way of alms for masses for thy soul, and God is minded that it be assigned to thee." "Now, God grant her a happy year," said Ferrando. "Dearly I loved her while I yet lived, and would hold her all night long in my arms, and cease not to kiss her, ay, and would do yet more to her when I was so minded." Whereupon he fell to eating and drinking with great avidity, and finding the wine not much to his taste, he said, "Now, God do her a mischief! Why gave she not the priest of the wine that is in the cask by the wall?" When he had done eating, the monk laid hold of him again, and gave him another sound thrashing with the rod. Ferrando bellowed mightily, and then cried out, "Alas! why servest thou me so?" "God," answered the monk, "has decreed that thou be so served twice a day." "For why?" said Ferrando. "Because," returned the monk, "thou wast jealous, notwithstanding thou hadst to wife a woman that has not her peer in thy countryside." "Alas!" said Ferrando, "she was indeed all that thou sayest. Ay, and the sweetest creature too, no comfit so honeyed. But I knew not that God took it amiss that a man should be jealous, or I had not been so. Of that, replied the monk, thou shouldst have bethought thee while thou wast there, and have amended thy ways, and should it fall to thy lot ever to return thither, be sure that thou so lay to heart the lesson that I now give thee, that thou be no more jealous. Oh, said Ferrando, dead folk sometimes return to earth, do they? They do, replied the monk, if God so will. Oh, said Ferrando, if I ever return, I will be the best husband in the world. Never will I beat her or scold her, save for the wine that she has sent me this morning, and also for sending me never a candle, so that I have had perforce to eat in the dark. Nay, said the monk, she sent them, but they were burned at the masses. Oh, said Ferrando, I doubt not you say true, and of a surety, if I ever return, I will let her do just as she likes. But tell me, who art thou that entreatest me thus? Late of Sardinia, I, answered the monk, dead too, and for that I gave my lord much countenance in his jealousy, doomed by God for my proper penance to entreat thee thus with food and drink and thrashings, until such time as he may ordain otherwise, touching thee and me. And are we two the only folk here? Inquired Ferrando. Nay, there are thousands beside, answered the monk, but thou canst neither see nor hear them, nor they thee. And how far, said Ferrando, may we be from our country? Oh-ho, returned the monk, why, 'tis some miles clean out of shit range. Faith, said Ferrando, that is far indeed. Methinks we must be out of the world. In such a course, alternately beaten, fed, and amused with idle tales, was Ferrando kept for 10 months, while the abbot, to his great felicity, paid many a visit to the fair lady, and had the jolliest time in the world with her. But, as misfortunes will happen, the lady conceived, which fact, as soon as she was aware of it, she imparted to the abbot, whereupon both agreed that Ferrando must without delay be brought back from purgatory to earth and her, and be given to understand that she was with child of him. So the very next night the abbot went to the prison, and in a disguised voice pronounced Ferrando's name, and said to him, Ferrando, be of good cheer, for God is minded that thou return to earth, and on thy return thou shalt have a son by thy lady, and thou shalt call him Benedetto, because 'tis in answer to the prayers of thy holy abbot and thy lady, and for love of Saint Benedict, that God accords thee this grace. Whereat Ferrando was overjoyed, and said, It likes me well. God give a good year to Master Lord God, and the abbot, and St. Benedict, and my cheese-powdered, honey-sweet wife. Then, in the wine that he sent him, the abbot administered enough of the powder to cause him to sleep for 4 hours, and so, with the aid of the monk, having first habited him in his proper clothes, he privily conveyed him back to the tomb in which he had been buried. On the morrow at daybreak Ferrando revived, and perceiving through a chink in the tomb a glimmer of light, to which he had been a stranger for full 10 months, he knew that he was alive, and began to bellow, Let me out! Let me out! Then, setting his head to the lid of the tomb, he heaved amain, whereby the lid, being insecure, started, and he was already thrusting it aside when the monks, matins being now ended, ran to the spot and recognized Ferrando's voice, and saw him issue from the tomb, by which unwonted event they were all so affrighted that they took to flight, and hied them to the abbot, who, rising as if from prayer, said, Sons, be not afraid. Take the cross and the holy water, and follow me, and let us see what sign of his might God will vouchsafe us. And so he led the way to the tomb, beside which they found Ferrando standing, deathly pale by reason of his long estrangement from the light. On sight of the abbot, he ran and threw himself at his feet, saying, "My father, it has been revealed to me that 'tis to your prayers and those of St. Benedict and my Lady that I owe my release from purgatorial pain and restoration to life. Wherefore 'tis my prayer that God give you a good year and good calends to-day and all days." "Laud we the power of God," said the abbot. "Go then, son, as God has restored thee to earth, comfort thy wife, who since thou didst depart this life has been ever in tears, and mayst thou live henceforth in the love and service of God." "Sir," answered Ferrando, "'tis well said, and for the doing, trust me that as soon as I find her I shall kiss her, such is the love I bear her." So saying, he went his way, and the abbot, left alone with his monks, made as if he marvelled greatly at the affair, and caused devoutly chant the Miserere. So Ferrando returned to his hamlet, where all that saw him fleeing, as folk are wont to flee from spectacles of horror, he called them back, asseverating that he was risen from the tomb. His wife at first was no less timorous, but as folk began to take heart of grace, perceiving that he was alive, they plied him with many questions, all which he answered as one that had returned with ripe experience, and gave them tidings of the souls of their kinsfolk, and told of his own invention the prettiest fables of the purgatorial state, and in full folk moot recounted the revelation vouchsafed him by the mouth of Ragnolo Brachiello before his resuscitation. Thus was Ferrando reinstated in his property, and reunited to his wife, who, being pregnant, as he thought by himself, chanced by the time of her delivery to countenance the vulgar error that the woman must bear the infant in the womb for exactly 9 months, and gave birth to a male child, who was named Benedetto Ferrondi. Ferrando's return from purgatory, and the report he brought thence, immeasurably enhanced the fame of the abbot's holiness. So Ferrando, cured of his jealousy by the thrashings which he had gotten for it, verified the abbot's prediction, and never offended the lady again in that sort. Wherefore she lived with him, as before, in all outward seemliness, albeit she failed not, as occasion served, to foregather with the holy abbot, who had so well and sedulously served her in her especial need. End of Day 3, the 8th story.
Day 3, the 9th story of the Decameron. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Ruth Golding. The Decameron by Giovanni Boccaccio, translated by J. M. Rigg. Day 3, the 9th story. Gilette of Narbonne cures the King of France of a fistula, craves for spouse Bertrand Roussillon, who marries her against his will, and hies him in despite to Florence, where, as he courts a young woman, Gilette lies with him in her stead, and has 2 sons by him. For which cause he afterwards takes her into favour, and entreats her as his wife.
Lauretta's story being ended, and the queen being minded not to break her engagement with Dioneo, it was now her turn to speak. Wherefore, without awaiting the call of her subjects, thus with mien most gracious, she began.
Now that we have heard Lauretta's story, who shall tell any to compare with it for beauty? Lucky indeed was it that she was not the first, for few that followed would have pleased, and so, I misdoubt me, 'twill fare ill with those that remain to complete the day's narration. However, for what it may be worth, I will tell you a story which seems to me germane to our theme. Know then that in the realm of France there was a gentleman, Isnard, Comte de Roussillon by name, who being in ill health, kept ever in attendance on him a physician, one Master Gérard of Narbonne. The said Count had an only son, named Bertrand, a very fine and winsome little lad, with whom were brought up other children of his own age, among them the said physician's little daughter Gilette. who, with a love boundless and ardent out of all keeping with her tender years, became enamoured of this Bertrand. And so, when the Count died, and his son, being left a ward of the king, must needs go to Paris, the girl remained beside herself with grief, and, her father dying soon after, would gladly have gone to Paris to see Bertrand, might she but have found a fair excuse. But no decent pretext could she come by, being left a great and sole heiress, and very closely guarded. So, being come of marriageable age, still cherishing Bertrand's memory, she rejected not a few suitors, to whom her kinsfolk would fain have married her, without assigning any reason. Now, her passion waxing ever more ardent for Bertrand, as she learned that he was grown a most goodly gallant, tidings reached her that the King of France, in consequence of a tumour which he had had in the breast, and which had been ill tended, was now troubled with a fistula, which occasioned him extreme distress and suffering. Nor had he as yet come by a physician that was able, though many had essayed, to cure him, but had rather grown worse under their hands. Wherefore, in despair, he was minded no more to have recourse to any for counsel or aid. Whereat the damsel was overjoyed, deeming not only that she might find therein lawful occasion to go to Paris, but that if the disease was what she took it to be, it might well betide that she should be wedded to Bertrand. So, for not a little knowledge had she gotten from her father, she prepared a powder from certain herbs serviceable in the treatment of the supposed disease, and straightway took horse and hied her to Paris. Arrived there, she made it her first concern to have sight of Bertrand, and then, having obtained access to the king, she besought him of his grace to show her his disease. The king knew not how to refuse so young, fair, and winsome a damsel, and let her see the place. Whereupon, no longer doubting that she should cure him, she said, "Sire, so please you, I hope in God to cure you of this malady within 8 days, without causing you the least distress or discomfort." The king only scoffed at her words, saying to himself, "How should a damsel have come by a knowledge and skill that the greatest physicians in the world do not possess?" He therefore graciously acknowledged her good intention, and answered that he had resolved no more to follow advice of physician. "Sire," said the damsel, "you disdain my art because I am young and a woman. But I bid you bear in mind that I rely not on my own skill, but on the help of God and the skill of Master Gérard of Narbonne, my father, and a famous physician in his day." Whereupon the king said to himself, "Perchance she is sent me by God. Why put I not her skill to the proof, seeing that she says she can cure me in a short time, and cause me no distress?" And being minded to make the experiment, he said, "Damsel, and if, having caused me to cancel my resolve, you should fail to cure me, what are you content should ensue?" "Sire," answered the damsel, "set a guard upon me, and if within 8 days I cure you not, have me burned. But if I cure you, what shall be my guerdon?" "You seem," said the king, "to be yet unmarried. If you shall effect the cure, we will marry you well and in high place." "Sire," returned the damsel, "well content indeed am I that you should marry me, so it be to such a husband as I shall ask of you, save that I may not ask any of your sons, or any other member of the royal house." Whereto the king forthwith consented, and the damsel, thereupon applying her treatment, restored him to health before the period assigned. Wherefore, as soon as the king knew that he was cured, "Damsel," said he, "well have you won your husband." She answered, "In that case, sire, I have won Bertrand de Roussillon, of whom, while yet a child, I was enamoured, and whom I have ever since most ardently loved." To give her Bertrand seemed to the king no small matter, but having pledged his word, he would not break it. So he sent for Bertrand and said to him, "Bertrand, you are now come to man's estate, and fully equipped to enter on it. 'Tis therefore our will that you go back and assume the governance of your county, and that you take with you a damsel whom we have given you to wife." "And who is the damsel, sire?" said Bertrand. "She it is," answered the king, "that has restored us to health by her physic." Now Bertrand, knowing Gilette, and that her lineage was not such as matched his nobility, albeit seeing her he had found her very fair, was overcome with disdain, and answered, "So, sire, you would fain give me a she-doctor to wife. Now God forbid that I should ever marry any such woman." "Then," said the king, "you would have us fail of the faith which we pledged to the damsel, who asked you in marriage by way of guerdon for our restoration to health." "Sire," said Bertrand, "you may take from me all that I possess, and give me as your man to whomsoever you may be minded, but rest assured that I shall never be satisfied with such a match." "Nay, but you will," replied the king, "for the damsel is fair and discreet, and loves you well; wherefore we anticipate that you will live far more happily with her than with a dame of much higher lineage." Bertrand was silent, and the king made great preparations for the celebration of the nuptials. The appointed day came, and Bertrand, albeit reluctantly, nevertheless complied, and in the presence of the king was wedded to the damsel who loved him more dearly than herself. Which done, Bertrand, who had already taken his resolution, said that he was minded to go down to his county, there to consummate the marriage. And so, having craved and had leave of absence of the king, he took horse, but instead of returning to his county, he hied him to Tuscany, where, finding the Florentines at war with the Siennese, he determined to take service with the Florentines, and being made heartily and honourably welcome, was appointed to the command of part of their forces at a liberal stipend, and so remained in their service for a long while. Distressed by this turn of fortune, and hoping by her wise management to bring Bertrand back to his county, the bride hied her to Roussillon, where she was received by all the tenants as their liege lady. She found that during the long absence of the lord everything had fallen into decay and disorder, which, being a capable woman, she rectified with great and sedulous care, to the great joy of the tenants, who held her in great esteem and love, and severely censured the count that he was not satisfied with her. When the lady had duly ordered all things in the county, she dispatched 2 knights to the count with the intelligence, praying him that, if 'twas on her account that he came not home, he would so inform her, in which case she would gratify him by departing. To whom with all harshness he replied, "She may even please herself in the matter. For my part, I will go home and live with her when she has this ring on her finger, and a son gotten of me upon her arm." The ring was one which he greatly prized, and never removed from his finger, by reason of a virtue which he had been given to understand that it possessed. The knights appreciated the harshness of a condition which contained 2 articles, both of which were all but impossible, and seeing that by no words of theirs could they alter his resolve, they returned to the lady and delivered his message. Sorely distressed, the lady, after long pondering, determined to try how and where the 2 conditions might be satisfied, that so her husband might be hers again. Having formed her plan, she assembled certain of the more considerable and notable men of the county, to whom she gave a consecutive and most touching narrative of all that she had done for love of the count, with the result; concluding by saying that she was not minded to tarry there to the count's perpetual exile, but to pass the rest of her days in pilgrimages and pious works for the good of her soul. Wherefore she prayed them to undertake the defence and governance of the county, and to inform the count that she had made entire and absolute cession of it to him, and was gone away with the intention of never more returning to Roussillon. As she spoke, tears not a few coursed down the cheeks of the honest men, and again they besought her to change her mind and stay. All in vain, however. She commended them to God, and, accompanied only by one of her male cousins and a chambermaid, all three habited as pilgrims, and amply provided with money and precious jewels, she took the road, nor tarried until she was arrived at Florence. There she lodged in a little inn kept by a good woman that was a widow, bearing herself lowly as a poor pilgrim, and eagerly expectant of news of her lord. Now it so befell that the very next day she saw Bertrand pass in front of the inn on horseback, at the head of his company; and though she knew him very well, nevertheless she asked the good woman of the inn who he was. The hostess replied, "'Tis a foreign gentleman, Count Bertrand they call him, a very pleasant gentleman, and courteous, and much beloved in this city. And he is in the last degree enamoured of one of our neighbours here, who is a gentlewoman, but in poor circumstances. A very virtuous damsel she is too, and being as yet unmarried by reason of her poverty, she lives with her mother, who is an excellent and most discreet lady, but for whom, perchance, she would before now have yielded and gratified the Count's desire." No word of this was lost on the lady. She pondered and meditated every detail with the closest attention, and having laid it all to heart, took her resolution. She ascertained the names and abode of the lady and her daughter that the Count loved, and hied her one day privily, wearing her pilgrim's weeds, to their house, where she found the lady and her daughter in very evident poverty, and, after greeting them, told the lady that, if it were agreeable to her, she would speak with her. The gentlewoman rose and signified her willingness to listen to what she had to say. So they went into a room by themselves and sat down. And then the Countess began thus: "Madam, methinks you are, as I am, under Fortune's frown, but perchance you have it in your power, if you are so minded, to afford solace to both of us." The lady answered that, so she might honourably find it, solace indeed was what she craved most of all things in the world. Whereupon the Countess continued, "I must first be assured of your faith, wherein, if I confide and am deceived, the interests of both of us will suffer." "Have no fear," said the gentlewoman. "Speak your whole mind without reserve, for you will find that there is no deceit in me." So the Countess told who she was, and the whole course of her love affair, from its commencement to that hour, on such wise that the gentlewoman, believing her story the more readily that she had already heard it in part from others, was touched with compassion for her. The narrative of her woes complete, the Countess added, "Now that you have heard my misfortunes, you know the two conditions that I must fulfil, if I would come by my husband. Nor know I any other person than you that may enable me to fulfil them. But so you may, if this which I hear is true, to wit, that my husband is in the last degree enamoured of your daughter." "Madam," replied the gentlewoman, "I know not if the Count loves my daughter, but true it is that he makes great show of loving her. But how may this enable me to do aught for you in the matter that you have at heart?" "The how, madam," returned the Countess, "I will shortly explain to you. But you shall first hear what I intend shall ensue if you serve me. Your daughter, I see, is fair, and of marriageable age, and by what I have learned and may well understand, 'tis because you have not the wherewith to marry her that you keep her at home. Now, in recompense of the service that you shall do me, I mean to provide her forthwith, from my own moneys, with such a dowry as you yourself shall deem adequate for her marriage." The lady was too needy not to be gratified by the proposal, but nevertheless, with the true spirit of the gentlewoman, she answered, "Nay, but, madam, tell me that which I may do for you, and if it shall be such as I may honourably do, gladly will I do it, and then you shall do as you may be minded." Said then the Countess, "I require of you that through some one in whom you trust, you send word to the Count, my husband, that your daughter is ready to yield herself entirely to his will, so she may be sure that he loves her, even as he professes; whereof she will never be convinced until he send her the ring which he wears on his finger, and which, she understands, he prizes so much; which being sent you shall give to me, and shall then send him word that your daughter is ready to do his pleasure. And having brought him hither secretly, you shall contrive that I lie by his side instead of your daughter. Perchance by God's grace I shall conceive, and so, having his ring on my finger, and a son gotten of him on my arm, shall have him for my own again, and live with him even as a wife should live with her husband, and owe it all to you." The lady felt that 'twas not a little that the Countess craved of her, for she feared lest it should bring reproach upon her daughter. But she reflected that to aid the good lady to recover her husband was an honourable enterprise, and that in undertaking it she would be subserving a like end; and so, trusting in the good and virtuous disposition of the Countess, she not only promised to do as she was required, but in no long time, proceeding with caution and secrecy as she had been bidden, she both had the ring from the Count, loath though he was to part with it, and cunningly contrived that the Countess should lie with him in place of her daughter; in which first commingling so ardently sought by the Count, it so pleased God that the lady was gotten, as in due time her delivery made manifest, with 2 sons. Nor once only, but many times did the lady gratify the Countess with the embraces of her husband, using such secrecy that no word thereof ever got wind, the Count all the while supposing that he lay, not with his wife, but with her that he loved, and being wont to give her, as he left her in the morning, some fair and rare jewel, which she jealously guarded. When she perceived that she was with child, the Countess, being minded no more to burden the lady with such service, said to her, "Madam, thanks be to God and to you, I now have that which I desired, and therefore 'tis time that I make you grateful requital, and take my leave of you." The lady answered that she was glad if the Countess had gotten aught that gave her joy, but that 'twas not as hoping to have guerdon thereof that she had done her part, but simply because she deemed it meet and her duty so to do. "Well said, madam," returned the Countess, "and in like manner, that which you shall ask of me I shall not give you by way of guerdon, but because I deem it meet and my duty to give it." Whereupon the lady, yielding to necessity and abashed beyond measure, asked of her £100 wherewith to marry her daughter. The Countess, marking her embarrassment and the modesty of her request, gave her £500, besides jewels fair and rare, worth perhaps no less; and having thus much more than contented her, and received her superabundant thanks, she took leave of her, and returned to the inn. The lady, to render purposeless further visits or messages on Bertrand's part, withdrew with her daughter to the house of her kinsfolk in the country. Nor was it long before Bertrand, on the urgent entreaty of his vassals, and intelligence of the departure of his wife, quitted Florence and returned home. Greatly elated by this intelligence, the Countess tarried a while in Florence, and was there delivered of 2 sons, as like as possible to their father, whom she nurtured with sedulous care. But by and by she saw fit to take the road, and being come, unrecognised by any, to Montpellier, rested there a few days. And being on the alert for news of the Count and where he was, she learned that on All Saints' Day he was to hold a great reception of ladies and gentlemen at Roussillon, whither, retaining her now wonted pilgrim's weeds, she hied her, and finding that the ladies and gentlemen were all gathered in the Count's palace, and on the point of going to table, she tarried not to change her dress, but went up into the hall, bearing her little ones in her arms, and threading her way through the throng to the place where she saw the Count stand, she threw herself at his feet, and sobbing said to him, "My lord, thy hapless bride am I, who to ensure thy home-coming and abidance in peace have long time been a wanderer, and now demand of thee observance of the condition whereof word was brought me by the 2 knights whom I sent to thee. Lo, in my arms not one son only, but 2 gotten of thee, and on my finger thy ring. 'Tis time, then, that I be received of thee as thy wife, according to thy word." Whereat the Count was all dumbfounded, recognising the ring and his own lineaments in the children, so like were they to him, but saying to himself, nevertheless, "How can it have come about?" So the Countess, while the Count and all that were present marvelled exceedingly, told what had happened, and the manner of it, in precise detail. Wherefore the Count, perceiving that she spoke truth, and having regard to her perseverance and address, and her 2 fine boys, and the wishes of all his vassals and the ladies, who with one accord besought him to own and honour her thenceforth as his lawful bride, laid aside his harsh obduracy, and raised the Countess to her feet, and embraced and kissed her, and acknowledged her for his lawful wife, and the children for his own. Then, having caused her to be rearrayed in garments befitting her rank, he, to the boundless delight of as many as were there, and of all other his vassals, gave up that day, and some that followed, to feasting and merry-making, and did ever thenceforth honour, love, and most tenderly cherish her as his bride and wife. End of Day 3, the 9th story. Recording by Ruth Golding.
Day 3, the 10th story of the Decameron. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For further information or to volunteer, please go to LibriVox.org. Reading by Andy Minter. The Decameron by Giovanni Boccaccio. Translated by J. M. Rigg. Day 3, the 10th story. Alibech turns hermit, and is taught by Rustico, a monk, how the devil is put in hell. She is afterwards conveyed thence, and becomes the wife of Nerbali.
Dioneo, observing that the queen's story, which he had followed with the closest attention, was now ended, and that it only remained for him to speak, waited not to be bidden, but smilingly thus began.
Gracious ladies, perchance you have not yet heard how the devil is put in hell, wherefore, without deviating far from the topic of which you have discoursed throughout the day, I will tell you how 'tis done. It may be that the lesson will prove inspiring. Besides which, you may learn therefrom that, albeit love prefers the gay palace and the dainty chamber to the rude cabin, yet for all that he may at times manifest his might in wilds matted with forests, rugged with Alps, and desolate with caverns, whereby it may be understood that all things are subject to his sway. But to come to my story, I say that in the city of Capsa in Barbary there was once a very rich man, who, with other children, had a fair and dainty little daughter, Alibech by name. Now Alibech, not being a Christian, and hearing many Christians that were in the city speak much in praise of the Christian faith and the service of God, did one day inquire of one of them after what fashion it were possible to serve God with as few impediments as might be, and was informed that they served God best who most completely renounced the world and its affairs, like those who had fixed their abode in the wilds of the Thebaid desert. Whereupon, actuated by no sober predilection, but by childish impulse, the girl, who was very simple and about 14 years of age, said never a word more of the matter, but stole away on the morrow, and quite alone set out to walk to the Thebaid desert, and by force of resolution, albeit with no small suffering, she, after some days, reached those wilds, where, espying a cabin a great way off, she hied her thither, and found a holy man by the door, who, marvelling to see her there, asked her what she came there to seek. She answered that, guided by the Spirit of God, she was come thither seeking if haply she might serve him, and also find some one that might teach her how he ought to be served. Marking her youth and great beauty, the worthy man, fearing lest if he suffered her to remain with him he should be ensnared by the devil, commended her good intention, set before her a frugal repast of roots of herbs, crab-apples, and dates, with a little water to wash them down, and said to her, "My daughter, there is a holy man not far from here, who is much better able to teach thee that of which thou art in quest than I am. Go to him, therefore." And he showed her the way. But when she was come whither she was directed, she met with the same answer as before, and so, setting forth again, she came at length to the cell of a young hermit, a worthy man, and very devout, his name Rustico, whom she interrogated as she had the others. Rustico, being minded to make severe trial of his constancy, did not send her away as the others had done, but kept her with him in his cell, and when night came, made her a little bed of palm leaves, whereupon he bade her compose herself to sleep. Hardly had she done so before the solicitations of the flesh joined battle with the powers of Rustico's spirit, and he, finding himself left in the lurch by the latter, endured not many assaults before he beat a retreat and surrendered at discretion, wherefore he bade adieu to holy meditation and prayer and discipline, and fell a musing on the youth and beauty of his companion, and also how he might so order his conversation with her, that without seeming to her to be a libertine, he might yet compass that which he craved of her. So, probing her by certain questions, he discovered that she was as yet entirely without cognizance of man, and as simple as she seemed. Wherefore he excogitated a plan for bringing her to pleasure him under colour of serving God. He began by giving her a long lecture on the great enmity that subsists between God and the devil, after which he gave her to understand that, God having condemned the devil to hell, to put him there was of all services the most acceptable to God. The girl, asking him how it might be done, Rustico answered, "Thou shalt know it in a trice. Thou hast but to do that which thou seest me do." Then, having divested himself of his scanty clothing, he threw himself stark naked on his knees, as if he would pray, whereby he caused the girl, who followed his example, to confront him in the same posture. The following are untranslated.
E così stando, essendo Rustico più che mai nel suo desidero acceso per lo vederla così bella, venne la resurrezione della carne, la quale, riguardando Alibec e maravigliatasi, disse: Rustico, quella che cos'è che io ti veggio, che così si pigni in fuori, e non lo io? Oh, figliuola mia, disse Rustico, questo è il diavolo di che io t'ho parlato, e vedi tu, ora egli mi dà grandissima molestia, tanto che io appena la posso sofferire. Allora disse la giovane: oh, lodato sia Iddio, che io veggio che io sto meglio che non stai tu, che io non ho cotesto diavolo io. Disse Rustico: tu di vero, ma tu hai un'altra cosa che non la ho io, e haila in iscambio di questo. Disse Alibec: o che? a cui Rustico disse: hai l'inferno, e dicoti che io mi credo che Iddio t'abbia qui mandata per la salute dell'anima mia, perciò che se questo diavolo pur mi darà questa noia, ove tu vogli aver di me tanta pietà e sofferire che io in inferno il rimetta, tu mi darai grandissima consolazione e a Dio farai grandissimo piacere e servigio, se tu per quello fari in queste parti venuta a sé. Che tu di? La giovane di buona fede rispose: o padre mio, poscia che io in inferno sia pure quando vi piacerà. Disse allora Rustico: figliola mia, benedetta sia tu. Andiamo dunque e rimettiamolovi sì che egli poscia mi lasci stare. E così detto, menata la giovane sopra uno dei loro letticelli, le insegnò come star si dovesse a dovere incarcerare quel maledetto da Dio. La giovane, che mai più non aveva in inferno messo diavolo alcuno, per la prima volta sentì un poco di noia, perché ella disse a Rustico: per certo, padre mio, mala cosa dee essere questo diavolo, è veramente nemico di Dio, che ancora all'inferno, non che altrui, duole quando egli vi dentro rimesso. Disse Rustico: figliola, egli non avverrà sempre così. E per fare che questo non avvenisse, da 6 volte, anzi che di su il letticel si movessero, ve li misero tanto che per quella volta gli trasser sì la superbia del capo, che egli si stette volentieri in pace. Ma ritornatagli poi nel seguente tempo più volte, e la giovane ubbidiente sempre a trargliele si disponesse, avvenne che il giuoco le cominciò a piacere, e cominciò a dire a Rustico: ben veggio che il ver dicevano che valentuomini in capsa, che il servire a Dio era così dolce cosa, e per certo io non mi ricordo che mai alcuna altra ne facessi, che di tanto diletto e piacer mi fosse, quanto è il rimettere il diavolo in inferno. E perciò io giudico ogni altra persona che ad altro che a servire a Dio attende essere una bestia. Per la qual cosa essa spesse volte andava a Rustico e gli dicea: padre mio, io son qui venuta per servire a Dio e non per istare oziosa, andiamo a rimettere il diavolo in inferno. La qual cosa facendo diceva ella alcuna volta: Rustico, io non so perché il diavolo si sfuga dell'inferno, che se egli vi stesse così volentieri come l'inferno il riceve e tiene, egli non se ne uscirebbe mai. Così adunque, invitando spesso la giovane, Rustico era al servigio di Dio, confortandolo, sì la bambaggia del farsetto tratta gli avea, che egli a talora sentiva freddo che un altro sarebbe sudato. E perciò egli incominciò a dire alla giovane che il diavolo non era da castigare né da rimettere in inferno, se non quando egli per superbia levasse il capo. E noi, per grazia di Dio, l'abbiamo sì sgannato, che egli priega il Dio di starsi in pace. E così alquanto impose di silenzio alla giovane, la qual, poi che vide Rustico non la richiedeva a dovere il diavolo rimettere in inferno, gli disse un giorno: Rustico, se il diavolo tuo è gastigato e più non ti dà noia, me il mio inferno non lascia stare, perché tu farai bene che tu col tuo diavolo aiuti a tuttare la rabbia al mio inferno, come io col mio inferno ho aiutato a trarre la superbia del tuo diavolo. Rustico, che di radici d'erba ed acqua viveva, poteva male rispondere alle poste, e dissele che troppi diavoli vorrebbero essere a potere all'inferno attutare, ma che egli ne farebbe ciò che per lui si potesse. E così alcuna volta le soddisfaceva, ma sì era di rado che altro non era che gittare una fava in bocca al leone, di che la giovane, non parendole tanto servire a Dio quanto voleva, mormorava anziché no.
However, the case standing thus, deficiency of power against superfluity of desire between Rustico's devil and Alibec's hell, it chanced that a fire broke out in Capsa, whereby the house of Alibec's father was burned, and he and all his sons and the rest of his household perished, so that Alibec was left sole heiress of all his estate. And a young gallant, Nerbali by name, who by reckless munificence had wasted all his substance, having discovered that she was alive, addressed himself to the pursuit of her, and having found her in time to prevent the confiscation of her father's estate as an esciat for failure of heirs, took her, much to Rustico's relief and against her own will, back to Capsa, and made her his wife, and shared with her her vast patrimony. But before he had lain with her, she was questioned by the ladies of the manner in which she had served God in the desert, whereto she answered that she had been wont to serve him by putting the devil in hell, and that Nerbali had committed a great sin when he took her out of such service. The ladies, being curious to know how the devil was put in hell, the girls satisfied them, partly by words, partly by signs. Whereat they laughed exorbitantly, and still laugh, and said to her, "Be not downhearted, daughter. 'Tis done here too. Nerbali will know well how to serve God with you in that way." And so, the story passing from mouth to mouth throughout the city, it came at last to be a common proverb, that the most acceptable service that can be rendered to God is to put the devil in hell, which proverb, having travelled hither across the sea, is still current. Wherefore, young ladies, you that have need of the grace of God, see to it that you learn how to put devil in hell, because 'tis mightily pleasing to God, and of great solace to both the parties, and much good may thereby be engendered and ensue. End of Day 3, the 10th story.